Well, I am a theist, and I do believe in God, but I do believe in God in a different sense from pretty much most anybody I know, because I'm an avid study in prophecy and whatnot. And to me, many people look at prophecy as as something that's meant to interpret what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
But for me, when I see prophecy, I see it as a way of actually interpreting things. For example, many people think the book of Genesis is about the creation of mankind. And sure, it reads that way because that's the way it was translated. However, if you go to other places in Scripture, for example, Psalms 103, verse 15, it compares man to the grasses and the flowers of the field. And then if you go to somewhere like Ecclesiastes, it calls man a beast of the field. So you can compare mankind to both animals and flowers and grasses. And what people don't realize is that what happens if you look at a name in the Bible, and what if they just left it as a name rather than using what it actually says? For example, Adam in the book of Genesis does not have to just be a name. It can mean earth, red clay, or it can also mean produce. For example, vegetation.
Okay, hold on. You're going through a whole lot, and it sounds like you're starting to go to crazy town, so I want to kind of put the brakes on so that we can make sure we're in the right.
See, I wouldn't do this in SC.
No, you wouldn't.
The crazy town comment.
No. Well, I you know what? Honestly, Gabe, I'm glad you called in. I'm really, really glad we're talking about it. It means that you want to be challenged on it. And right now, you're using this tactic that I've seen where people will dissect the Bible and then flip it around because it meant things in other languages because it was translated a bunch of times, and then bring it back out and it means whatever they want it to mean, right? So if I used your methodology, could I make the Bible say something different? And if that's the case, how can you tell your view is correct and my view isn't?
Well, here's the thing as far as what I do. I look at all the different translations a word could possibly mean. For example, I think of God as word because it's literally stated that in Scripture, where it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, if you think of the definition of a word, logic can literally mean the Word. I think of the Bible as something that was written by people like philosophers who, during their time, if they had shared what they were really trying to say, could have been executed for what they were trying to really say. That's why they wrote it in coded information.
So you're saying that there's a code in the Bible that you're able to decrypt that was written by people who didn't believe what they were writing?
Yes.
So what's to tell you that there's any truth in what you're reading?
Well, that's why you translate everything, including.
But I can translate Harry Potter and find true things in it. If you're saying that this is a book that was written by people who didn't even believe what they were writing, then why would you take anything in that book as true? Like, I'm wondering why you're looking into a book that you're saying yourself is dishonestly written.
I didn't say it was dishonestly written because the actual stories are actually lived out in actual history.
Okay, do you think there was a literal Adam?
I believe there's a literal Adam and a literal Eve, a literal beginning of things.
Okay. So what if we traced our lineage back to show that there was never a time where there was just one set of humans?
Say that again?
So we're able to trace our genetic history back, and there was never a time where there was just one man and one woman. So... Well,
let me ask you this. Does it
No.
Adam is one man?
Hold on. Answer this first. You can ask me, and I'd be happy to answer. But What I'm asking, and I'll be very specific with this, is we are able to trace our genetic history back. And when we trace our genetic history back, our shared history as humans, there was never a time where there was just one man and one woman. Never, right? You can test that. You can actually be taught how to test that and test it yourself and find the same results.
Is that relevant to you, or is it really your ability to interpret things the correct way?
Is it relevant to me or what?
Is being shown that we did not evolve from one man and one woman relevant to your confidence that this is true? Or is it your ability to interpret things that is the reason why you think the belief is true?
Or C, other.
Right, I don't want to limit you to those. But when you called in, one of the first things you led with was prophecy, and that you have this special way of interpreting things. And Eric asked you, and we kind of got a little bit off track, but it was a great question. How are you figuring out that you have the correct interpretation if we had a verse and you, Gabe, were able to interpret it in your mind the right way, but if somebody else interpreted it in a completely different way that you disagree with, how can we, hold on a second, I wasn't finished. How can we figure out who has interpreted it correctly? Are both parties interpreting it correctly? Is it just whatever I want to interpret it as? Are they wrong and you're correct? Is there some other reason? Can you expand on that?
The answer is yes. Both parties are interpreting it correctly. And here's why. You've heard of Socrates, because I heard you talking about it on your previous caller, right?
Socrates seemed like a pretty cool dude.
Yeah, okay, go on.
Socrates had a discussion with a man named Protagoras. And it was a discussion about something related to the measure of a man. This phrase is actually used in Revelation into related to the mark of the beast, the number of a man. It's related to that. Now, what the conversation was about was basically, for example, Protagoras was trying to argue that, for example, everything is in the eye of the beholder, I guess you could say. For example, if I see a color as blue and you see a color as red, we're both seeing the same color, right? Right. So why should I be wrong and you be wrong, or you be wrong?
Well,
it doesn't make sense.
Well, hold on.
We're both right.
No. There's a difference. And the difference is if you're talking about a color, right, you're talking about a wave, a light pattern that is hitting your eyes, right? It is getting to you at a certain frequency that is coding for a certain color in your eye. There is truth that you can find out about it. Now, if we're looking at the same color and the way Anthony identifies that color is with the name red, and I'm looking at that and I go, oh, I've always been told that that's the color green. That doesn't mean that one of us is right or wrong. That means that we have a difference in our understanding and the definitions, but that never changed the color on the wall. The color was always there.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
You're saying the same thing I'm saying. I'm basically saying it's the same color. The color hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is one person's definition for red and another person's definition for blue. Right. So in other words, they're both seeing the exact same color, but one is defining it differently.
The issue that the issue that I think we have here, though, is that if 300 people can interpret the same sentence differently and come to wildly different interpretations of what that one sentence means, it sounds like what you're saying is that all 300 of them are justified.
Correct.
All 300 of them are justified in coming to their conclusions because they just happen to have interpreted that way, even if their conclusions of what that sentence means wildly differs from the other people.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Now, here's why I'm saying that. See, think about what I said earlier. In the beginning was the Word.
And Word was God, and God was the Word. God to do word. Yes, God.
So
what does that mean? Can a person be a word? No, can a person be a word?
Yes, a person can be a word.
No, you can.
If I interpret it that way, I'm justified in concluding that based on what Gabe's telling us here. What I think is alarming to me is this idea that I can interpret anything any way that I want, and I'm justified in concluding that it's true because I have interpreted that way. That is a very frightening thing to conclude. What can't you? Hold on a second. What couldn't you conclude was true with that type of philosophy?
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to explain what God is in the Bible. You know how mathematics has variables, right? Variables are something that are given value, right?
Hold on a second. I want to go to an extreme here. If I looked at a verse that you said, well, when I interpret this as Gabe, this is saying my God is real, or a God is real. If I were to look at that same verse, it sounds like what you're saying is that if I interpreted that verse to say a God is not real, that we would both be justified in our conclusions.
Exactly.
Then
does it mean that we're both correct?
It doesn't mean that we're both wrong either.
One of you would have to be wrong because
a God can't exist and not exist simultaneously.
Not necessarily. That's not necessarily.
Not necessarily. True. It's not Schrodinger's God, man. Either it's one or the other.
You're not understanding what I'm saying God is. I'm saying God is that variable. Basically, the variable is something that has no defined essence until someone gives it to it. For example, if I say A equals C and B equals C, both A and B equals C, so A can conclude that it is B. A and B are the same thing because they both equal C. Like that. That's what I'm saying. I'm defining God as a variable, a word. That is my definition of what God is. Right. I'm not trying to say that all the beliefs in the world are right or everything. I'm just saying that whether God exists or does not exist is based on perspective of what God is.
So,
for example,
hold on a second. I want to ask
both good and evil.
Okay, hold on a second.
When we have these conversations, we tend to be interested in how people are concluding that what they think is true is really true. That is the fundamental core of shows like this, I think. We want to believe things that are true. My question to you is, what do you mean by the word true? How would you define the word true? Can true mean anything that I want to define it as? Or is there a fairly commonly acceptable definition of what the word true is? How do you define that word?
It's your first statement. Anything that you can define what true is. If I say true is false, then true is false. If you say true is true, then true is true. That is what it is.
How do you think words are formed, generally speaking? Can you take me through the process of how dictionaries are made and words are created?
People come to a commonality on what something means, and they give a definition to each of the words or symbols that are used within their language.
Right.
And so
can the meanings of those words change over time?
Yes, they can.
Okay. For the purpose of describing reality...
It's just like science. Science can change over time.
Sure. For the purpose of describing reality, do humans generally agree to what words mean for the purpose of those conversations?
Well, that's hard to say. Generally, I'd say sometimes no, sometimes yes.
Well, I mean, in order
they have a designated language, so yes. I mean, generally,
you could walk into the nearest bank there in Pineville, Louisiana, and ask to withdraw $5 from the bank, for example. But if you define that word 5 to mean 500, do you think that they would buy into your definition of it, or are humans agreeing to what certain words mean?
because the language has already been agreed upon.
Well, how is that any different than what you're saying with people can interpret things the way that they want? Why couldn't you just interpret $5 to mean 500 and demand $500 for your $5 withdrawal?
But here's the thing. It's not about the why. It's not. See, your question was whether God exists or not, right?
No, my question was...
It's not about the why.
No, I think the question here is, if I think that there's no God and you think that there is a God, that we're both correct in our conclusion.
Exactly.
But only one of those things can be true. There has to be so even
this
in
is a
the
screaming gumball example,
yeah.
but I don't know how much more.
Okay, so hold on before we jump into the gumballs. Let's go back to the color example, right?
Oh, colors are really problematic. I'd go with numbers.
Well, but here's the thing: is if you have always known, you know, a certain color to have a definition, and it has a different, right? So you always knew that color to be green, but I know that color to be red. We're seeing the same thing, but our definitions are different, right? The color never changed. It's just our understandings of the word.
These are labels that we use to describe what we're observing and using our senses for.
No matter what we say, we're not going to actually change what color the wall is. And in the same way, a God either exists or a God does not exist, right? Either one exists or one does not.
Regardless of
what you think, I think, anyone else thinks. It doesn't matter what, you know, even if you define it. So the reason why it's different when you said, does a God exist or not, that's the question. No, it doesn't really matter. You're giving us your definition. I had people who've called in who said, I define God as the universe, and that's it. And then I go, okay, well then I have to accept that your God is true. Because, yeah, the universe is there, but you have a really weird definition of God, right? I'm listening to you. Tell us, right? Can a God... Like you just told Anthony that a God can both exist and not exist at the same time. Can you please clarify that for us? And
oh darn,
he's gone. Oh well.
This is a problem that we run into a lot when we're using SE with people. We encounter this this idea. This is actually a little deeper than just truth being subjective.
Yeah.
This is words. As long as I define a word in this way, I'm justified in concluding that it's really true. We tend to carry around Tic Tacs or a box of candies, or we have this wonderful container of gumballs that I think somebody here in the audience even brought in.
Well,
this is a wonderful.
Are you ready for this?
This is a wonderful example to use when you encounter this type of roadblock. Colors can be problematic because we could be looking at the same color, and because of defects in our eyes, we have discrepancies in that. But if we were to shine a spectrograph at a color, we can get a number, we can get a value. That would be the same for you or me. Right, providing we're using the same machine and the machine is calibrated properly and all that.
Right.
What I try to do is look at quantities, or you can even go simpler. Would you agree that this container is either empty or not empty, and that it cannot simultaneously be both?
Well,
what I'm thinking that our caller may say is, if I think that it's empty and you think that it's not empty, that we're both justified and correct in our answer. And that's simply not the case.
That's so problematic.
It could be demonstrated.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and also.
I'm baffled. I'm really baffled by this type of caller here. Well, and this isn't the first time I've seen this. I see this again and again. This is a really problematic thing that we face.
I've seen that people employ this to try and wiggle their way out of, you know, justifying something that should not, you know, they shouldn't be justifying, you know.
Oh, sure.
If they hold a God belief and it's not rational at all, then I'm going to muddy the water and be wonky enough that I don't have to think about it anymore.
How dare you challenge my claim because I'm justified in making it because I've made it.
Well, and because I have wonky, you know, I've redefined words so much that anything could be anything, and because anything can be anything, then I can be right and you can be right and everyone can be right. So I love, by the way, you see the glowing white balls, right? Do you see those? Those are the green ones, and they're getting caught on the green screen. That's the ethereal quality of the gumball. right?
Another reason why not to use, why I wouldn't recommend using colors with examples like that. Frankly, I don't know how a person can leave their house if anybody can make anything true simply because they've concluded that it's true because they think that it is.
I cannot live in a world where people really think that.
Why would you put a seatbelt on if you can just make it true that seatbelts don't protect you in crashes?
Or how about just, why don't you jump off a building if you can just tell yourself you can fly?
Yeah. It's this kind of special pleading and permission to believe in the mediocre.
Yeah, you're right.
It's very frustrating.
All right.
I was trying to use a real world example there. Let's walk into a bank right now and withdraw $50 simply because I'm now redefining what these words mean. And it's true to me. If I call 550, I'm okay to call that. But heck, if I get a bill for $50, I can call that $5 as well. And I only owe you $5 instead of 50.
That would be.
I don't see how you can
build a
function.
society.
I don't. Yeah, exactly.
No.
We're beating this horse to death.
Yeah, we are. Okay.